A lot of us want to do work that feels important and that matters and is doing really good stuff in the world. But the truth is, we all define that differently. So in order to get to the definition of our own personal purpose, we have to define what actually matters to us in our own personal way.
LGO is a globally touring professional speaker, from TEDx Boston to the Today Show, and the founder of Limitless Possibility, a niche consulting firm working with entrepreneurs, philanthropists, executives, and thought leaders to get them unstuck and achieving extraordinary results. She previously was the founder and CEO of NPAG, an executive search firm serving nonprofits, foundations, universities, and advocacy organizations, and she was a political appointee at the White House in the USA. In this episode, we talk about why purpose doesn't have to be high or lofty, how we end up with other people's definitions of purpose, and the freedom of having more than one purpose. You're listening to Going Conscious, the podcast where we discover new ways to live a more conscious life of fulfillment and freedom. Each week, I speak with entrepreneurs, academics, and changemakers who have made big transformations, left unfulfilling lives behind, and found meaning in this new world where purpose drives success. Let's get inspired to live our unique journeys to the fullest. Let's explore the impact we want to make and deepen our understanding of ourselves, each other, and this beautiful world around us. Live your freedom. I'm your host, Nikki Trott. In this episode, we talk about why millennials are the first generation who live as the same person at home and at work, the brain science behind manifestation, the discomfort of going conscious, how hindsight makes a challenging journey sound easy, faking being an extrovert as a raging introvert, defining and creating your own success, and why success means finding your own model of leadership. Now let's go to our conversation. Laura, hello and welcome to Going Conscious.
Hey, Nikki, it is so great to be here.
Very excited to have you here with us. And I'm really excited to dive right in and to talk to you a bit about your book, Limitless, How to Ignore Everybody, Carve Your Own Path and Live Your Best Life. Because I'm really interested in how you describe purpose and how you talk about it. And I read your words where you said purpose is too narrowly defined as a higher calling. Spoiler alert, I'm here to tell you that you're not going straight to hell if your purpose includes one day buying a fancy car and a beach house. And I really love that, how you are broadening what purpose can mean and what it can include. And I would love to know a bit more about how you define purpose.
Yeah, so as you know, I spent 20 years doing executive search for C-suite executives for nonprofits, NGOs, advocacy organizations, universities, foundations, and research organizations. And so I feel like I'm a little bit of an unimpeachable source when I say that purpose doesn't have to be higher or lofty, right? So much time is spent feeling like I don't have a purpose. I'm just doing a job, or I'm pushing paper, and I'm, it's making ends meet, and it's really good for my career, and I'm able to get out of debt so that my kids can make different decisions than I was able to make, or I'm able to make a lot of money so I can support causes and candidates I care about, right? All the things that we say aren't like, I'm not Mother Teresa feeding the lepers in India, right? Or I'm not, St. Peter at the pearly gates with the clipboard and the abacus trying to figure out what really matters. The truth is that purpose is really just your purpose. And it's funny because when I was writing the book, I actually looked up the word purpose because I didn't want to get called out by some internet troll. And according to the dictionary, the word purpose, like I'll tell you my definition, but the definition of the word purpose in the dictionary is the reason for which something is done. Period. End of definition. That's it. The reason for which something is done. So, a lot of us want to do work that feels important and that matters and is doing really good stuff in the world. But the truth is, we all define that differently. So in order to get to the definition of our own personal purpose, we have to define what actually matters to us in our own personal way. And so for me, my purpose is really to be able to have freedom and flexibility and choice to be able to show up for the people I love and the causes I hold dear. And that can take lots of different forms. Sometimes it takes maximizing my income so that I can donate lots of money. Sometimes it means taking on a client who I don't necessarily love, but who's going to pay me a lot of money, so I don't have to take on a second or a third client, and I can actually have more time to spend with my kids who are about to leave for college, and then they're gone. And for some of my life, it may be actually like stopping my job and volunteering for that nonprofit or that candidate. But every one of us defines it totally differently. And I think the problem, Nikki, is that we get so caught up in what everyone else defines purpose, calling, higher, lofty, all of this, that we end up being limited by everyone else's definitions, and we forget to find our own.
Yeah, I love that, how you describe this. It's this ease in which we're limited by other people's definitions and other people telling us what matters or what doesn't. And it's something that's, I think, infectious. And we're seeing so much discussion around purpose. And as you know, purpose is a big part of the work that I do as well, helping entrepreneurs to create conscious businesses and really work towards a cause that's bigger than themselves. I suppose that's how I define purpose, as something bigger than yourself. But I really love how you talk about it and how you open it up for people. And you've also written about how millennials are demanding purpose in their work more than ever, with just a job not being enough for our generation, as a millennial myself. And I'm interested to know what you think about why that might be.
Yeah, it's really funny. Whenever I get on stage and I speak, or at least before COVID, I was speaking in conferences all over the world. I would get on stage and I would mention millennials. You can just see the millennials in the audience. Like, you could see their shoulders rise up to their ears and their body language would get tense, because all of you are so used to all of us Gen Xers or the boomers just like railing against you and telling you that you're just like entitled and you're awful and self-centered and all of that. But I love millennials, and I love millennials because you are the first generation who has always lived your life as the same person at home as you do at work. So we're always told, like, look for life, work-life balance, like as if work's going to be over here and life's going to be over there, and never the twain shall meet. And are you living for your work? Are you working for your life? I don't know. Like, that just felt like nonsense to me. But when you grow up and you are digital natives and you've got, your MySpace pages and then your Facebook pages and Instagram and TikTok and Instagram, you are basically living out loud. So you can't go to work and be a different person at work than you are in your life, because that just doesn't make sense. Like, you don't build relationships that way. You don't build trust that way. So millennials, you are really the first generation who stopped looking for work-life balance, but are really looking for work-life alignment. And that meant that a lot of you brought your values from the life part of your life to the work part of your life. So you started talking about being able to manifest your values on a daily basis. If you're working for a company and you believe in helping the environment, you're going to have conversations about recycling and about saving energy and about which vendors you choose. If you're somebody who believes in a healthy lifestyle, you're not going to go work at a company that's creating, crappy food and cigarette products, right? Like, you are the generation who really wants to have what I call in the book consonance, right? This alignment, this harmony, this flow between who you are and what you do. So I love millennials because, we think millennials are kids, right? But the oldest millennials are 41, 42 years old, which means they're not living in your basement eating frozen pizzas and playing video games. They're actually managers, right? They're CEOs, they're bosses, they're parents. So they're leaders. And I think I read something that by 2022, 75% of the workforce are going to be millennials. So, you guys are in charge, and awesome, because you're leading the way to really drive those conversations about purpose and being conscious about who we are and intentional about who we are in our work so that it reflects who we are in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. And I love your description of speaking about millennials and their shoulders rising. Of course, we have many, many good traits too. And I really really enjoy how you describe there's not work-life balance, but work-life alignment, and finding that flow and really bringing who we are into the workplace. And I hadn't thought before that it's to do with social media and the fact that we are so open about what we care about. And I think that's so true and really rings true. So thank you so much for that. And I'm wondering then, how do you find that these millennials or the people who you speak to and interview for your books, how do they bring these two together? Who they really are and what their work is? Because there are many challenges, I suppose, in that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of them just drive these conversations in the workplace. When I was growing up, and I just turned 50, so I'm like square in the middle of the Gen X generation. I was raised by parents who expected to go to school, find a trade, go to college, pick a career, whatever their path was. And then it's, 25 years in the gold watch. Like you stay in the same place. Like you have a career at a place. And my generation, we moved jobs. I'm on my third career now, which is great and it's incredible. And I'm able to follow my interest and think about what I want to do and how does that bring out the best in me. But your generation will be moving jobs even more. So you are living in a world where your skill set is portable, right? It comes with you. So as a manager, I had to learn how to engage my staff. And it wasn't like, let me just throw money at you. Because when I was raised, it was like, you can judge your success by how high you climb, how fancy your title is, how big your office is, how nice the package is that you're getting paid, and how big your salary is. And that's not the case anymore. Like I ran a company, when I ran my search firm, I ran the company for 15 years and we were a fully virtual firm. We literally had no office space from the day we were created in 2002. We were like cool before we were COVID cool, right? Like we had a completely virtual office space. And that meant that not only did I not see my staff on a daily basis, they were completely away from me. Like their skill set, like the C drive, the like where they held all the files and all of their knowledge and all their was in their heads. So I had to make sure, because at the end of the day, when you run a knowledge-based company like I did, consulting firms, executive search, et cetera, it means that your value walks out the door every single day at the end of the day. So you have to figure out a way for that work to really reflect who they are. And that means getting them involved in different parts of the work, in leadership, in decisions. And, in the book, I talk about the 4 C's of consonance, and they're calling, connection, contribution, and control. And we can go through each of them, but, one of them is contribution. So how does this work contribute to the life you want to live? And that means for some of us, how much money do you want to make? It means for some of us, how do does it give you the career trajectory that you're looking for? Some of us, it might be, what kind of flexibility does it give you for your lifestyle? For others, it might be, how does this help you manifest your values on a daily basis? So, I had a person who was so good at the job. She was bringing in so much revenue. She was a sales machine. But I will tell you, she was a terrible colleague. She was not a good corporate, community member, if you will. And it became kind of poisonous to our culture. And I didn't want to get rid of her because she brought in so much money. But what I realized was that she was actually pushing other people out, because the way that I started to sort of cater to her, it really changed the dynamic. And I had people saying, like, this isn't my value set. I want to be in a company that doesn't just value the money, cash on the barrel. It actually values who we are and what we do in this work. And so I had to make a decision, right? Do I get rid of my best performing in terms of numbers person, or do I keep the ones who are really reflecting the value of who we are and what we do? And I kept throwing money at her, thinking that this is going to be the thing that's going to keep her here. Like I was, we were a small company, we were growing, and I needed to make sure that we had the revenue coming in. And I kept throwing money at her, bonuses after bonuses, but she was so poisonous to our culture because she kept walking, quote unquote, walking into my office. She'd call me up, she'd show up on Zoom calls and she'd be like, yeah, well, I brought in all this and like, you only gave me that. And it was never enough when I was managing her. And then one day I stopped giving her extra bonuses and I just put her in charge of our corporate philanthropy. You pick the nonprofit that we're going to give back, 5% of our revenue to this year. And she lit up, she blossomed. And it turned out that even though she was bringing in all this money, and I thought the old way of managing her and incentivizing her would be to give her all this money, what I realized was the truth is she just wanted to figure out how to be a whole person at work where she could then be the person she was at home and at work. And she came in and she told the story about how she grew up very underprivileged and had to scrape and scrap her way to get to everything she was, and she chose an organization that actually helped her in her youth to get to the place that her parents never could have gotten to, on their own, and she never could have gotten to without this organization's help. And suddenly she became a whole other person because she was able to do this. And so by allowing her to demonstrate her purpose, I actually solved two problems at once.
Amazing. That's such a lovely story. And you mentioned your 4 C's and told us a little bit about contribution. I'd love to hear about the others.
Yeah, so calling is, what you talk about in terms of purpose. It's that gravitational pull. It's the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning. It's the business you want to build. It's the bottom line you want to grow. It's the family you want to nurture. It's the cause that you want to solve. It's the leader who you want to serve, right? It's that thing that it gets you excited. Then there's connection. Connection, I think, is really a huge piece of the going conscious puzzle, because connection answers that question, like, does my work matter? Do I matter? If I didn't show up to work tomorrow, would anybody notice? Would anybody care? Does the work you're doing on a daily basis connect to that calling that you want to serve? Then contribution, we talked about it. How does this work contribute to the life that I want to live, me, myself? And then control. Well, control is like, how much personal agency do you have to make changes about the projects you work on, the teams to which you're assigned, the customers that land in your portfolio, the projects that you're on, the products that you're selling? Do you have any control over how much connection your work has to that calling and how much it contributes to your life? And the thing about the 4 C's is that each one of us at every age and at every life stage is going to want and need different amounts of each of the calling, connection, contribution, and control. My definition will be different than your definition, Nikki, but here's the thing. Your definition today is way different than your definition 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 10 years from now. So when I was 21 years old and dropping out of a law school to join a presidential campaign, I got paid all the ramen soup and idealism I could eat. Awesome. It was great. I had calling out the wazoo. I was like inspired. It was like everything. Like I was caught up in the just sort of entrepreneurial flow, the idealism, the dream, the excitement of the presidential campaign. I had no connection at all. I was getting the coffee for the guy who got the coffee for the guy who got the coffee. I was a nobody. I was a peon. In terms of contribution, I wasn't getting paid much, but boy, career trajectory, if this guy won and he ended up in the White House, I might end up in the White House. Pretty cool, right? And then, obviously manifesting values left and right. And then control, I had no control. I mean, were they going to send me to New York City or LA or Missoula? I had no control, but I didn't need it. Now, as I'm, as I mentioned, 50 years old and I've got 2 kids, one of whom's leaving for college in the fall, I am not going to take on a project, get on a plane, go somewhere, do something with clients that are not paying me my value, that are not using my time well, that don't respect what I bring to them. And not to sound like a diva, but I've put a lot of time in, right? I've got a good reputation. I have people who will hire me. So why would I take work that's going to take me away, that's not going to contribute to the values I want to manifest, that's not going to pay me enough, that's not connected to the next book I want to write or the business that I'm building, and doesn't give me, as much control? My definition now is so much different. But I think where we get it wrong, Nikki, is that we are told what is your calling in life? Like as if we have one. There's only one calling ever. There's only one purpose ever. And I would argue that it changes, and it probably changes every 5 to 7 years.
I completely agree with you. It's something I teach my clients as well. Whether it's calling or purpose, whatever the terminology, but there's this sense of scrabbling around, desperately looking for yours, needing to find it so you can get it into your grasp and then keep it forevermore. And of course, that's not the case. Our priorities change throughout the stages of our lives and what really matters to us. And I love how you contextualize it with your 4 C's. And I think that makes it really clear. You can see how the importance of those 4 C's will really change through the different phases of your life. And of course, then what your purpose is as well
I
reflects
mean, think
that.
about it. Like, how freeing would it be to know that you could have more than one calling, you could have more than one purpose, right? If you, one of the things that I write about in the book is this term "follow your passion." And I joke around that I think "follow your passion" is the world's worst advice. I think it's the spoken word illegitimate sister of the "live, love, laugh" tattoo, right? It's like it is. There is some flaxen-haired girl on Instagram who's like wearing her boho chic clothes and her little felt hat and her flower crown, and she's looking out over Coachella or something, or like a sunset or a beach, and she's in lotus position, and she's like imploring us with all of her Instafluencer might to follow your passion. And my problem with that is that I think what it tells you is that the minute something goes wrong, right? Like, find your passion, follow your passion, everything's going to be amazing. But the minute something goes wrong, the minute it gets hard, the minute you get told no, the minute you fail, well, I guess it just must not be your passion, because if it was, everything would be perfect. And the truth is that following your passion is not enough. We have to invest in our passion. And sometimes in the investing in our passion and falling down and getting back up and failing and learning and innovating and iterating and changing, we realize that actually our passion isn't here. It's actually 4 degrees north or 12 degrees south. And what I would love for people to do is not to just like, I'm going to follow my passion, but know that you can have lots of passions in your life, sometimes multiple passions at once. And it's okay, because it's in the exploring that you figure out what you are actually really passionate about. Because, people always say things like, oh, tell me what you would do if you knew you couldn't fail. And I think it's nonsense. Like, I say to people, tell me what you would do if you knew for sure you would fail, but you would do it anyway, over and over and over until you got it right. Because isn't your passion worth that? Like, isn't that how you figure out what you're passionate about? By figuring out what you're willing to work for?
Yes, absolutely. And I love that freedom of knowing you can have more than one purpose, as you put it. And well, you've had 3 careers yourself, Laura. So I'm interested to know how you have navigated changing careers and aligning with your purpose or calling along your journey so far.
Oh, well, it's interesting because I grew up thinking that I was going to go to law school. I was going to run for the United States Senate. I was going to solve all the problems. It was going to be great. And then I got to law school and realized that I didn't want to be a lawyer. I didn't want to be in law school. I was a terrible law student. I was basically flunking out. I mean, dropping out to join the presidential campaign was like a lifesaver to me, frankly. And so I ended up on that campaign. I ended up, Bill Clinton won. He ended up in the White House. I ended up in the White House. I helped create the AmeriCorps program, which was the reason that I fell madly in love with this campaign in the first place, because he talked about this idea of service in exchange for college tuition. And I was so enraptured by this idea. So I ended up in the White House helping create this program. And then I wanted to get back on the campaign trail 4 years later for his reelection campaign. And my then mentor said to me, look, you're kind of too old to get back on a campaign bus and eat cold pizza and sleep on high school gymnasium floors. Cause I was 25. So that's like dog years, right? That's ancient in campaign world time. He goes, but you're too young to be the domestic policy advisor. So go talk to my friend Arnie Miller. He runs the biggest search firm in the country that does specifically advocacy, nonprofit work. And he will find you a job at a nonprofit. You'll hide out there for 4 years, and then you'll come back and do something big on Al Gore's campaign. And I was like, great, sounds like a plan. And within 5 minutes of talking to him, what I realized was that he works in Boston. And my then boyfriend, who I thought was the one, was about to move to Boston. And I was like, well, you're in Boston. I should just come work for you. And he goes, you should come work for me. And I was like, great, I'll take the job. What do you do? And so I became a headhunter. So the first transition into going into campaign politics and into politics was just because I was so completely drawn to this idea. I was so completely drawn to this human and this person and this thing that was bigger than me, right? That's my purpose. This thing that was bigger than me that I couldn't not do it. And then I was so completely drawn to this human who I was madly in love with, who, P.S., we've been married for almost 25 years now. So good call on that one. That I wanted to follow him. And then I spent 5 years at that firm really learning from the best in the business about how to do this work well. And then I had this moment of rage where I realized that the way that we did the work wasn't actually solving our clients' problems in the ways that we thought it did. And when you're in consulting work and you're not solving your clients' problems, that means you are one of your clients' problems. And that to me was pretty untenable. So I quit and I started my own firm. And so I ended up becoming um, an entrepreneur, right? I never expected to become an entrepreneur. I never expected to become a CEO, to become somebody's boss. I would never wanted to be like in front. So that was, insane. But it was driven by this idea that I really wanted to help solve very specific problems for very specific clients. And so I did that for 15 years, but 10 years into it, Nikki, I got bored. I realized that like I like the innovating and the iterating and the growing and the changing. And we had really launched the business with a brand new way of doing this work that had never been done before. And it was fine in the beginning because the firm needed this like outspoken, moxie driven, just like iconoclast type. Like, I'm going to come in and tell you that everything you've ever known is wrong and you should do it this way. And we're the only ones who do it this way. So you have to hire us. And that was all well and good until about 6 or 7 years into it, where the whole sector caught on. And suddenly we launched a whole bunch of competition, which I think is, by the way, how you know that you're succeeding, right? Because people are starting to emulate you. And at the 10-year mark, my team was just like, dude, we like it's awesome. We love it. Can we just take the car on the road and see how fast we can drive it? Like, stop putting stuff in the engine. Like, we're ready to go. And that wasn't interesting to me. And what I realized was the firm needed not an innovator, but somebody who was super geeked out about the work, who loved it, who couldn't wait to like do management and quality improvement about the way we did the work. And I realized that if I stayed, and they wanted me to stay, if I stayed, it would have been a massive disservice to my people because my heart wasn't in that anymore. But my business partner, who came in around year 4 or 5, she loved it. There was nothing that she loved better than continuous quality improvement. And the firm really needed somebody like that. And so I told her I needed a plan. I needed a plan. So we created this sort of 5-year plan to exit me, which was difficult and tumultuous and emotional and surprising in a lot of ways, because I didn't expect it to be so emotional. It was so clear to me that the firm needed different leadership, but it wasn't clear to them, and they were scared. They were nervous about what it would mean when the founder leaves. Does the firm continue? What happens? But it worked out well. They did great. They're thriving. They're so successful now. I should have left earlier. And then maybe that was my third career, my second, maybe this is my fourth actually. So my fourth is then I sold the company. I didn't really know who I was when I was no longer LGO CEO. Here's my business card. And I was the chairwoman of a charity auction, and an arts charity auction. And a friend of mine who was a local newscaster introduced me, and she said, "Here's my dear friend Laura. She dedicates her life to philanthropy." And I remember thinking, I think she just lady who lunched me. Like, I think she just turned me into somebody who like wears a fancy hat and goes to a garden party and drinks tea, and that's all I do. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I was having this moment of identity crisis where I was like, is that all I am? Is that all I'm ever going to be? Oh my God, what's going to happen? Am I ever like, and are people ever going to stand up when I walk into a room? Like, my ego was all in a bunch. And so I went home that day and I bought lauragassnerotting.com, and I just started blogging. And a woman who was the executive producer of TEDx Cambridge, which is the largest TEDx event outside of Big TED, called me up and said, "That last blog post you wrote was great. Would you consider doing a TED Talk. And I was like, no, no way. That's terrifying. I don't want to speak in public. That sounds awful. And my now 18-year-old, who was, I guess, 14 at the time or 13 at the time, was in the backseat of my car when I took the call on speakerphone. And he was like, hey, Mom, don't you always tell me I have to do hard things? Don't you always tell me I have to do scary things? And if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you, right? Like, don't you always tell me that? So like, what gives, Mom, huh? So 6 weeks later, I'm on the stage, and the next thing you know, that talk gets some attention. I get offered to go places, and they pay me money, and I'm like, this is crazy. Like, you're going to pay me money to stand on stage and speak, and I'm not going to have deliverables for consulting clients for the first time in 20 years. Huzzah! Tell me more about this incredible job. And as I started doing more and more talks on bigger and bigger stages, I noticed that the other speakers on those stages all had books. So I was like, I got to get me one of them. So I wrote a book. So at each turn, the career shift was because I was drawn to something that was interesting, but I didn't quite understand it. I didn't quite know what it was, but I knew I could figure it out on the way there because I'd had enough sort of bricks in the wall that gave me a wide enough vista that I could see at least not what I needed to do, but who I could ask for help along the way.
If you enjoy Going Conscious, please subscribe for a new episode every Wednesday. If you think your friends and networks would benefit from listening, please share this podcast of fulfillment and freedom with them. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review. It's great to read what you think, and your support makes a big difference. Together, let's grow our courage and tools to transform and live the lives we really want to. As well as creating Going Conscious, I work as a transformation coach and conscious brand consultant. I'm on a mission to help holistically maximize conscious entrepreneurs to drive positive changes for themselves, others, and the planet. I can help you to transition and level up personally, and I can help your brand grow and make a bigger impact. To connect with me and find out more about how we can work together, find me on Instagram @NikkiTrott or on my website, nikkitrott.com. Please get in touch. I'd love to hear from you, and let's talk about your path of growth and development. So as you move between those different stages and roles, how important was your intuition in guiding you? Or how did you know that you were taking the right path or following the right steps? Because it sounds like you really flowed and things happened and people were there and opportunities came to you and you grasped them and flowed with them. But how did it feel?
I never knew. I never knew anything. People are always like, how'd you know everything would work out? And I'm like, I never knew. I never knew anything would work out. And it's really easy in hindsight to tell the story in a way that sounds successful. But like at every turn, like you don't know that the opportunity is going to be there until the opportunity is there. Like it's just there were a lot of really scary, uncertain, insecure moments. I mean, I spent a lot of time doing a lot of calculus about the dollars and cents, right? Like, will it work out? Is it going to happen? How many calls do you need to, like, it's a numbers game. Like how many calls, how many meetings, how many coffees do you have to have? How many times you have to practice the pitch until you say something that lands, that resonates. And I think like a lot of the people that we respect, who we think of are just super prolific, they just put stuff out every single day. And we don't see all the stuff that nobody sees because nobody sees it. But we see the stuff that goes viral and we're like, oh, how'd they do that? They just sat down one day and wrote a thing and it went viral. It's like, no, they wrote something every single day for 4 years and then something went viral. So I think intuition does play a part in it. I'm doing some research for my next book. And one of the things that I'm researching is this idea of luck. And it turns out that people aren't just born lucky. Like people aren't just born lucky where they like have an intuition, they decide to follow it and everything works out well. There are actually things that lucky people do. And, it's being extroverted. It's taking more meetings, it's going out, it's putting yourself like in the flow of opportunity. It's being optimistic. Sort of, if you assume something's going to work out, then you're more likely for it to work out because you see the possibility as opposed to all the risk. It's things like listening to your intuition, right? Listening to that voice inside your head, and frankly, manifesting, which I always thought was nonsense, but I've learned the science behind it, which is that if you decide you want to get a certain job or go to a certain place or do a certain thing, suddenly your brain has learned to sort out the millions of bits of data that come in every single second and sort for that. So it's not like you decide you want to go to Japan and all of a sudden there are sales for flights to Japan. No, the sales were always there. Your brain just didn't sort for that data. So manifesting works because you're sorting for what you want. So you can tell yourself that you're interested in something, that you feel something, that you want something, and your intuition will start to look for ways to find opportunity, to be more optimistic. And I am a raging introvert. You can fake being extroverted in those moments of extroversion. So I think for me, at least, in terms of the movement between careers, I it wasn't that I knew it was going to work. It was that I knew what I was going to do if I failed. And then I didn't worry about that anymore. So, like, when you switch something, like anybody who's listening to this, who's thinking about making a switch, I would ask them to consider this question: what will you do if you fail? And people always have an answer for that. It's usually like, well, I'm going to save 6 months of whatever before I quit my job. Or if I fail, I'll go back to the cubicle again. Or, my spouse has a good job, so we'll rely on him or her for a little while, or whatever the thing is. Like, we all have we know, like, we spend so much time worrying about failure that, like, what you'll do if you fail. But what we don't spend a lot of time doing is thinking about what we'll do if we're successful. And I think that the people who actually can flow between different opportunities and different jobs and different careers are not the ones that are so mired in the, oh my God, what will I do if I fail? But the ones who think about the possibility and the opportunity and manifest, like, what am I going to do if I succeed? Because where you put attention is, what grows.
Yes, I love that. Absolutely. Yes. When you put your attention on the success, then you grow that success. And I think it's really important to know that you can't fail. And yeah, like you say, having a backup plan means that you have something in place and nothing will be that bad. Nothing is really going to be that terrible. And I think that when we know that and understand that, we're able to take risks so much more easily. And without risks, of course, we can't grow.
Right. Right. I mean, that's where all the magic happens. And what I like about the conversation that you have on this podcast is that what happens in the decision to go conscious is a lot of discomfort, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
the way that it's painted on social media, it's like, I found my purpose. I'm living, an intentional lifestyle. I'm meditating. I'm doing all these wonderful things. I'm eating clean. I'm going vegan. I'm like, whatever the stuff is. And the truth is that it is easy to say that in hindsight. It's really easy to connect the dots backwards, right? I could tell the story of my career in a way that it was strategic and intentional, and I went to the White House to build these networks so that I could become a headhunter and capitalize on those networks. And then I learned everything I needed to learn, so I decided it was time for me to be the boss, and I started my own firm. Like, no, that's not true. Like, none of that happened. I can look back and I can say, yeah, okay, those things worked out, and boy, that would have been a really good strategy if I was smart enough to think about it. But none of us are smart enough to think about the strategy in advance because none of us have a crystal ball.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a completely different story in hindsight. And we're able to see those threads which link everything together and make connections which may or may not really have been there.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I think it's our responsibility to tell the real story, to
yeah.
not say that it was like magical and wonderful and there were never sleepless nights and I never, I was never living in the basement apartment with the cockroach clinging to my toothbrush in the morning. I could tell the story in a way that makes people feel really bad about themselves. But why do that? I feel like it's dishonest, it's a disservice, it makes no sense. And I think that the scary part is part of what builds you as a person. I don't know about you, but I've learned far more lessons from the failures and the mistakes than I have from the successes.
Yes, which I think means they're not really failures or mistakes at all. They're just lessons that needed to be learned.
Yeah, I talk in the book about how failure is not finale, it's fulcrum. It's like we are taught that if you fail, it's embarrassing. You'll be like excised from the pack. You'll, die in the Serengeti. Like, we've evolved. Like we are pack creatures, and it's just not right. Like it's it's funny. I gave this talk. The very first time I gave a talk about the book was at this thing called Renaissance Weekend. It was just like this. It's like a retreat of like thought leaders and thinkers, and like you can swing a cat and hit a Nobel Prize winner. It's like that kind of group. And I gave the talk and I did my whole like failure is not finale, it's fulcrum line. And then I looked down and right in front of me was an astronaut who had gone on 3 spacewalks. And I was like, except for you, sir. For the rest of us, as long as there is blood in your veins and oxygen in your lungs, failure is not finale, it's fulcrum, right? But like, there are very few of us for whom failure means the end.
Yeah.
And the truth is, it's not even that embarrassing because also nobody's paying attention. My favorite Eleanor Roosevelt quote, and I feel like it's like picking your favorite child because she was incredible, is you would worry much less about what other people thought about you if you realized how seldomly they did. Like nobody else is paying attention because frankly, they're all so worried that you're paying attention to them that they're too busy to pay attention to you. Like nobody's even watching. Like there are very few super public failures that are out there. And, to think that you're only going to be as popular as your last failure is to have hubris to feel like you're only going to be as popular as your last success. Like nobody cares. Nobody's paying that much attention. You can explore and experiment and try new things and change. And like, how do you know what you want to, like, you can't go boldly into your new conscious intentional life if you don't try on some like you don't walk into a store and like point to a dress and say, I'm going to take that home. Like you try things on. Like, how do you know what's going to fit? How do you know what's going to feel good? You have to try, you have to experiment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, how you bring up this sense that people really aren't watching you as much as you think.
Right.
And this is something that I coach my clients on around making big changes in their life towards their purpose as well, because it's also something that comes up if you've had this high flying career, running your own company or working in a big organization, and then you're making a big change. There's a real worry about judgment. And I also had that when I left my big successful fashion consulting business to start working with conscious entrepreneurs and purpose. I also thought everyone's going to think I've gone completely mad. But then you realize, no one's thinking at all. And they're really not paying so much attention to you. And it's so freeing to realize that. So I love how you talk about that. I think it's really important for us to let go of that idea that we're constantly being watched.
Yeah, I usually ask people when they're like, yeah, but I might fail. And I'm like, okay, and then what? Well, people will see it. Okay, and then what? Well, they'll think less of me. Okay, and then what? Like, and if you keep asking them, and then what? Eventually they're like, nothing.
Yeah.
And then nothing. They'll think of less. Okay, fine. And then what? Well, I'll try something else. Okay, and how will that go? Like, and if you just keep asking, and then what? Right. And maybe there'll be one person who's left over who's still pointing a finger. You're like, and what do you think about them? Well, I don't care about them. Well, okay. Like I had a client once who called me, and I'd been working as his executive coach for probably a couple months at this point. And he called, and he was living, he had made this very conscious decision to move from the suburbs into the city. He wanted to live a much more environmentally stable life, sustainable life. He had changed his job to stop working for a big company and work for like this mom and pop company. Like he had changed everything in his life. And he was really happy. And he was just trying to like figure out how to get to the next level of that because it was just a different world than he'd been in before. And one day he called me up and he's like, look, I know we've been working on this one path. He's like, one of my high school friends was just posting on social media about this fancy bright red convertible he just got. And I kind of wonder if I want one. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. Do you want one? What are you going to do with it? Are you going to where are you going to park it? Or when are you going to drive it? What is it going to feel like when you drive it? I'm like, let's think about it. Are you going to go somewhere for the weekend? You're like out on the open road. The wind is going through your hair. And he was like, well, I'm bald. So it's not going to go. And it was just really funny. But I was like, we're going to okay, so what is it going to feel like? And he's like, I don't know. He goes, I guess fine. And I'm like, does that vision excite you? And he's like, no. And I'm like, well, why do you want the convertible? And he's like, because my friend got one. So I feel like I should want one. And I was like, you just like, but do you? And he's like, actually, no. He's like, there's no part of that that I want. He's like, I guess if I wanted to spend a weekend, I could just rent one for the weekend. It would be a lot cheaper. It'd be better for the world. I wouldn't have to. I was like, yes, okay. But we do get caught up when we see other people on social media with this like, hashtag blessed type life. And they're like showing off their pictures of their like perfect children on the first day of school or their perfect vacations with their little heart hands over the sunset or like whatever it is. And we're like, wait, am I supposed to want that? Everybody is giving them lots of hearts and loves and likes. And my last post got 3. So maybe I'm supposed to want that. But do you want that? And will that really make you happy? And who do you care if you're getting 3 likes or 300 likes? I mean, does it actually matter? And sometimes we stop and we say, actually, no. Like the 3 people who liked that last post are actually my 3 closest friends. And that's amazing. And the 300 people who like theirs are paid followers. So maybe it doesn't actually matter. And maybe all of the time that we spend judging our bloopers by everyone else's highlight reel just makes us feel terrible about ourselves, but it's certainly not an intentional way to live. We get distracted,
Absolutely. And Laura, you described a little bit earlier that you are faking being an extrovert and you're actually a raging introvert.
Yes.
And you also mentioned that extroverts have more luck from what you've been researching. I am a raging extrovert, but I'm really interested, how do you fake being an extrovert? What's that like?
Oh, it's so exhausting. So I make my living as a motivational keynote speaker, which means I get up on stage and speak to thousands of people. Not exactly a job you'd expect an introvert to have, but I'm connected to a huge network of people who also do what I do. And I have been amazed at how many people are in this line of work are actually introverted. Because here's the thing. I don't actually have to interact with any of those people. Like I'm on stage and I'm talking and I pause throughout the talk to give them time to like do their part of the dialogue, right? A good speaker doesn't just, run through all the words. They stop and they move you through ideas and you're like, "Oh, yeah, I got that." And as they're talking, you're having a conversation with yourself. Your part's just not said out loud. And it's great because I can then have this conversation with 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 people, but I don't actually have to interact. I don't actually have to have the like awkward social, draining part of that. But then there's always the like book signing line after, there's the VIP thing before, there's like all the stuff. And then I go back to my room and I order room service and I stare at the wall. I don't even put on Netflix. Like I'm so drained by it. So I get my energy back by being alone. I'll go for a run. I'll do something where I'm just like solitary. I'm alone. But I've learned how to fake it. Like I understand that there are command performance moments where I have to show up. People have an expectation of who I am. Like people come up to me in the book signing line, they'll always ask me a question that goes somewhere along the lines of like, how'd you get to be such a badass or so brave or so fierce or so like whatever emotion they're assigning to me that they think I have, because I can get up on stage and talk in front of thousands of people and, with my like random combination of like moxie and awkward and just like, they think I'm just like vulnerable and open and all of that. But the truth is like, that's just like LGO on stage. Like Laura hiding in like fetal position in her hotel room after is not LGO on stage. It's a totally different human being. So, but I've learned that there are moments where I have to like put on that alter ego of being LGO. So usually what I do is I understand from the client or I understand from myself, like who are my targets? Who are the people who are like their VIPs? They want to feel really good at being at this event, or like, what are the things like the 5 lines that I write when I sign people's books? Unless we've had a conversation, there's something really personal I want to write. There's certain things that are my sort of my go-to line. So I sort of prep ahead of time. I know what the targets are. I know what I need to accomplish. I know who I need to talk to. I know how they need to feel at the end of the day. And I execute on the plan. And then when that's done, it's like it's done. I never go to an event and like work the room. But usually, and this is my super secret trick. Because I'm in the green room, I happen to get to know really interesting people who are far more important than me. And then I'll usually hang out at the VIP thing with one of those really important people. And then other people walk up to the really important person and they want to hang out with them. And they're like, well, who's this person? I don't know her at all. And she's hanging out with this really important person who I really look up to. So maybe she's really important too. So I should get to know her. So I sort of draft off of, like the extroverts will adopt the introverts and I draft off of the extroverts. So I think it's really just a matter of figuring out like what energizes you, what do you need to accomplish, and then how can you do that in a way that is least draining to you. So I can go to events, no problem, but I'm not going to circulate around the room. I'll stand at one particular point with one particular person and I'll use that as a way to I'll borrow courage, I'll borrow energy until I can have my own.
Yeah. Amazing. That makes so much sense. You really got the strategies sorted.
Yeah. So after this is all said and done, I'm going to come to London and I'm going to like draft off of you. I'm going to like hang out. I'm going to be like a shadow. I'm going to be your wing person, even though you're really going to be my wing person.
Let's do it. I'd love that. And so, Laura, as we come towards the end of our discussion today, what does personal success look like to you? And how has this changed since the beginning of your career and the political campaign days?
Oh gosh. I used to think that being a leader was being the person under the spotlight, was being the person in the front, was being the CEO. They were in the lead, so they must be the leader. And what I've learned over time is that there are so many different models of leadership. There are people who lead from the back. There are people who lead from the middle. There are people who lead very quietly. There are people who lead loudly. There are so many different types of leaders. And for me, personal success means finding my own version of that. Not because I need to be in the lead, but because when I am, my personality type is such that when I am leading something, I'm an all-in kind of person. Like if I'm on a committee, I'm a chair of the committee. If I am, your ride or die, I'm showing up at your house every day at 5 a.m. and we're going for a run. Like I'm not very good at being like just halfway in. Like I'm an all-in kind of gal. Like you want me in your corner in the fight. I am an all-in kind of gal. But that also means that for me, personal success means finding my own definition of leadership and living into that. And really what it comes down to, I've said to my husband years ago that all I want people to say at my funeral is that their life was just a little bit better because I was part of it. Like I don't need a full page obit in the Times. I don't need, my name to be boldface. I've always said that I want the kind of fame where I can sell a lot of books when I, write my next book, but I can also walk through an airport without anybody recognizing me. You know what I mean? Like it's like I don't want to be famous. I don't want to be a celebrity. I want to have influence because I want to help people be better versions of themselves, but it's because I'm so excited about people finding that best version of themselves rather than because I want anyone to know my name. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I absolutely love that. It's much more about the impact that you make on the world and on people's lives. That's really beautiful. And is there a key takeaway or message from our conversation today that you'd like to share?
Yeah, look, I think that we're all taught that success is like the biggest and fastest and most expedient path to the corner office, and that we should hustle harder and rise and grind and lean in. And the truth is that is just, it is a singular, myopic, unflinching definition that serves very few people. And, it's not that definition of success that's going to make you happy. I learned in 20 years of doing executive search, which is a career where I called people who were very successful at what they did, and they all called me back because despite all this success, they weren't all that happy and they wanted they thought the next happiness would be like the next job, the next promotion, the next raise. Maybe for you, it's the next purchase, the next, weight loss plan, the next marriage, the next divorce, whatever the thing might be. We all think that happiness is just around the corner, but the truth is that it's not until we define and then lean into our own version of success that we can find both success and happiness. And that's why I was so excited to come talk to you today, because it's all about going conscious. It's all about being intentional. It's all about figuring out your own purpose and living that every day.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I love that. Finding your own purpose and living that every day and being intentional. And of course, we're recommending your book in our notes to our listeners. But we also wanted to ask if there's a book that you've read recently and loved that you'd like to recommend to us as well.
Oh gosh. Can I recommend a handful of them?
Sure.
So Sally Krawcheck wrote Own It. Sally Krawcheck was the former CFO of Smith Barney, the CEO of another huge bank on Wall Street, I can't remember. And she realized that women are not in charge of their futures because they're not in charge of their financial futures. And it is a phenomenal book. She's the founder of Ellevest right now. Kara Golden wrote Undaunted. She's the founder of Hint Water. And it's all about how she actually created this company when everybody told her she couldn't do it. Black Sheep is a book by my friend Brant Menswar, which is all about finding those values like black sheep wool can't be dyed. What are the values that are deep inside of you that are just so absolutely incredible? And then lastly, my friend Carrie Lorenz has a brand new book coming out. She's the first female F-14 fighter pilot in the U.S. Navy, and her book is called Span of Control. And it's all about how do you manage in moments of crises the things that are in your span of control so that you can ignore everything else.
Wow, what a reading list. Thank you so much. Amazing. And lastly, where is the best place for our listeners to find you and your work online, Laura?
Sure. So my name is Laura Gassner Otting. It's a lot of names. So all my good friends call me LGO. So I am all over the interwebs at Hey, H-E-Y, Hey, LGO. And if you go to heylgo.com, that's a shortcut to my website. And also, if you've listened to me talk about continents of calling, connection, contribution, and control, and you're like, oh, I want to learn more, there are 4 questions that you need to ask yourself to figure out whether or not you're incontinent and how to get there. And they are at my4questions.com.
Amazing. My4questions.com. I'm intrigued. I'm going to check that out right now. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having you, and so many more things that we could discuss, but we're already at time. So thank you. I'm really grateful, and we will speak again soon.
Yes. Thanks, Nikki.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with the inspiring LGO. I love how she talks about how millennials are the first generation who are showing up at work as their whole selves. We are bringing our values with us and no longer willing to compromise them, or at least not for long. Whether you are running your own business or working for someone else, what does this mean for the future of work? I believe it will only increase with the younger generations coming into work too, who want to work for a better world more and more. I find it incredibly exciting to imagine how these new attitudes will shift work culture and the kind of behaviors and companies that are rewarded. These big changes are things we're already seeing right now in purpose-driven companies outperforming their competitors. This refusal to compromise on our values in any part of our lives is a huge part of our personal journeys of going conscious too. We talked about the discomfort of going conscious, which has been an important topic in previous podcast episodes too. As we each realize what success means to us and let go of external ideas and expectations, we come up against much resistance in ourselves and in our close environments. But as we push through this, we see the unlimited possibilities for how we choose to live our lives. And there really is no turning back. We discussed the importance of knowing you can't fail and the power that this realization gives you. Once you understand that you need to take each step on your journey and each will lead you to new learnings and the next step, you can let go of being so attached to the result and the final destination and really thrive in the journey itself, allowing success to unfold for you. Of course, you create your own success. But when you tune into your intuition and values and make decisions from there, you can't go wrong. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe now. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star rating and short review. If you think people you know might benefit from listening to Going Conscious, please share it with them. I know I get much of my inspiration from podcasts which are shared with me. For all episodes, our library and more, visit goingconscious.com. Your support to spread this positive message of fulfillment and freedom means so much. As well as hosting Going Conscious, I help conscious entrepreneurs to transition and unleash their power and purpose with my transformation coaching and conscious brand consulting work. Discover more on Instagram at Nikki Trott or on my website, nikkitrott.com. I'd love to hear from you and to talk about your goals, questions, or how we can work together. And if I don't hear from you before then, see you next Wednesday on the next episode of Going Conscious. As always, live your freedom.